All right, Chris.
Yes.
Well, we're here.
And that's true. We are.
Yeah, that's right. We are
here. There's a lot of things said.
Yes.
And a lot of things said that look really official.
Yes.
Are they?
So, it's not just, well, and that's what the weird thing is. I'm going to let Chris jump into this, but heading into this, what's been interesting about these rumors or leaks is that it's not just like an email, or it's not just somebody said to somebody and that person leaked out that information. This is like a storyboarded like pictures and all kind of things. Chris, dive in, man. Let us know what's been going on. This is wild.
So I'm going to do a little bit of a somewhat high level of all the various things that came out yesterday.
Please.
And some of these things, for context, this is all the leak, as it were, is all stemming from documentation that was submitted for the Microsoft and FTC trial. So that's where this all came from, which lends even more legitimacy to it. Some of these things, as we get down closer to the bottom, I feel like aren't new information. Maybe we have a few more bits and pieces, but it's like we already knew these things. So the fact that some of those seem to be getting the most attention is a little strange to me, because it's like, this ain't new. We already knew this kind of thing. But yeah, so the Federal Trade
Commission. It's like, did we know? You know what I'm saying? There's like pop culture, and then there's people that follow the news,
right?
Sure,
and follow gaming. Maybe like we knew, but I wonder if some of this information is like brand new to the majority.
True. But when I say I'm seeing a lot of people freak out about it, I'm seeing people who should well know this stuff, that usually follow these kinds of things. Yeah, it should be like, got you. And again, maybe it's just because we're getting even more bits and pieces. I don't know. But anyways, I digress. So one of the first things that came out, or the first things I'm going to hit on anyways, is that supposedly there is going to be a new Xbox Series X model. It's referred to as Brooklyn. That would be its code name. And this is one of the ones that Gabe was mentioning, like, it's a picture with diagrams and pointing to different various things. Like, it's an official looking thing out of the document. Like, it's not like some mock-up that somebody, photoshopped, online from just hearing bits and pieces.
Or one of those like, remember when people do patents and we see like the wire outline of what something should look like with the things drawn to it?
Yep.
It's not that either. This is a fully realized, like, graphical, put together 3D, situation.
So a few more bits and pieces about that is it will be a diskless cylindrical version of the Xbox Series X.
Yeah.
It will have a 2 terabyte SSD as opposed to the 1 terabyte, which the current version has, at least out of the box. It'll have a USB-C port, which honestly, until I saw this, it didn't dawn on me that I don't think this current Series X, I think it has 3 USB-A ports, 2 on the back and 1 on the front. I don't think there's a C anywhere on it. So, and I was like, oh yeah, I guess that does make sense, because it wasn't dawning on me it didn't already have one of those. Some other smaller technical improvements, like to the system's Wi-Fi and the PSU, the standby mode and various things like that, as well as, and we get less information about this, but there is supposedly some kind of Series S codenamed Elwood that would also be in the works and released sometime after Brooklyn. And if the plans that were laid out in this documentation are still accurate, which they may not be, according to that, they were looking to release this version or this model of the Series X in October of 2024 for $500. So not that far around the corner if this is still going to be when this thing is released. Now, some people have been taking this section in particular to be like, well, hold up, Phil Spencer. Seems like you were lying when you said no mid-gen refresh kind of thing. But one, we don't know if these plans are still in the works. 2, I think that all of his comments on mid-gen refresh really stemmed more towards a upgraded, like a pro version with more power. This would not be there are a few technical improvements like I mentioned, but essentially power-wise, this is the same machine as the current Series X. So I don't think that you can say that if this turns out to be accurate still, that, Phil Spencer was lying about mid-gen refresh, because the context of his comments really pointed more towards a upgraded model where it's more powerful and all that kinds of stuff. So as long as they don't bring that out, then Phil Spencer wasn't like misleading you necessarily, at least in my opinion.
I think that you can jump on it just because you're like, you can take his comments and try to go all the way with them. There won't be we don't feel like it's important right now to do a mid-gen refresh. oh, okay, so there won't be anything new, period. You know, so you can go there, but I think that you're right, Chris, where it's like, well, no, he said there's not going to be a more powerful, like what we believe as a mid-gen refresh. Now, they might be doing a prettier console that has like little tech things that are ticked up and now it does, stronger Wi-Fi and stuff like that. And but no, this is not going to be, to me, it's not better. It doesn't have a disc, a disc drive. So like, for somebody who buys physical video games still, to me, it's like, okay, it looks different. Same teraflop, same output, same power. So it's like, it's this, to me, you'd be buying it. This is more like a Xbox Series S Plus than it is a bump up from the Xbox Series X. You know what I'm saying? Because the same thing as the X, but if you want to go all digital, it's more powerful than the S. So if you wanted what we call the S a Game Pass machine. If you want a Game Pass machine that, kind of is doing what PlayStation did, where it's like, here's the strongest thing we've got. Here's the strongest thing we've got with no disc. That's what it is. You know what I mean? More than it is a refresh. It's more like makeup and we've changed the casing.
Yeah. And again, like if you go back to, for anybody who may be feeling like he was being disingenuous, if you go back to his comments and you read the context of the entire statement, it's very clear that it's in the vein of making different SKUs that are more powerful. So now developers have to target different power levels, which this would not apply to. Thus, his comments are not misleading, in my opinion. Another thing that got mentioned is a new Xbox controller. This controller can pair seamlessly to the cloud as well. So kind of similar to like what Stadia would do. So it still doesn't go into the specifics of like how that would work. I mean, obviously you would still need a console, but that's interesting that it would be able to pair directly that way. It would also feature haptic feedback changes and things much more akin to like what the DualSense has. Again, it doesn't go into a ton of specifics, but it would have more things like that. Modular thumbsticks, a rechargeable and swappable battery, and the ability to wake by just being picked up rather than having to hit the power button on it, which is kind of interesting.
Oh, interesting.
And again,
that'll be annoying when I have to just move my controller.
This is something that was going to launch around May of 2024 for about $70, which is what current controllers go for if you're not getting them on sale. So it wouldn't be like a huge price increase like the Elite version of it just to get these new features. It would basically just become like the new Xbox default controller, I would assume. May even be the one, again, it doesn't say this, but it wouldn't surprise me if it ended up being the one shipping with the devices as you buy new versions of the Series X or Series S as they come out.
Brooklyn.
Yeah, Brooklyn. Outside of that, there was documentation on there about what Microsoft's thinking about their next machine beyond the current version that they're already doing. And it again, some people are like really like, oh my gosh, this is so kind of crazy and whatever like that. Essentially, they would be building a hybrid game platform capable of leveraging the power of the on-client unit as well as the cloud to be able to do even more power. So it really wouldn't rely so much on whatever power they could put out of the box, meaning that the machine that they ship out, the base unit that's all the power that's on it, could be lessened and it could be just more efficient, and all this wouldn't have to be like a huge step above what the current one is, because they would be leveraging in a lot of the cloud computing stuff to kind of work together to give you an even better gaming experience with, more ray tracing capabilities and lots of other different things. This is kind of, in my opinion, they started down this road in the Xbox Series X. I remember them having talks there were GDC, I think, things, and I'm a nerd, so I look at stuff like that, where they talked about utilizing the cloud to help render some of the things as you're playing on your Xbox One. So this is more about just continuing to fine tune and bring and develop more cohesiveness with that ultimate vision that I feel like they've shared since the very beginning. So this totally makes sense to me that this would be the direction they'd try to go with this.
And I feel like that's what we've said is the direction that consoles are going to go, period, is that they're going to be more cloud machines, and they're going to be, it's going to be less and less dependent on the thing that's right in front of you and more dependent on some off-site computing that's going on. And, I've been very vocal about my, not disdain or anything like that, but just like my untrust of the cloud.
Yes.
And how.
Yeah, but you've kind of
how
changed your
that-
tune here a bit lately. I mean, granted,
Well,
cloud
I
just in
have-
the other room, but still.
Yeah, exactly. I'm using my own stuff, but I also still can't play like twitchy games on it. You know what I mean? I still can't play like a first person shooter from the cloud. I haven't been able to, and have an experience that I feel like is comparable to sitting there with the console. The only thing that just scares me a little bit is like, I don't like the always online thing. Like, I've got some games on my phone that I'm like, there's no reason this should be always online.
Right.
But for some reason it is, where it's like, there's nothing that, I mean, besides just like sending data back and forth really quickly, and so that they can know exactly where I'm at on a level. So if I shut down the app and start it back up, they're like, continue from here. But even that you could have done on the phone. I'm thinking of a game I play. I think it's called Mighty Doom or something like that. It's like it's a Archero knockoff with like the Doom guy, and I really enjoy it. But for some reason, you have to be online to play it, even though it's like this little just shooty shoot game on your phone with these little graphics going on. And so like the always connected thing just like has always like especially 'cause Xfinity and some of these guys are still doing data caps and things like that. And it's like, you know, when the internet's out, then can you just not play it? You know, or, you know, I'm just thinking about those times where, you know, and if your power's out, then you're not playing either. But, you know, you just think about those times back in the day when the power would go out and you're like sitting around doing something and you're like, well, there's times now where the internet goes out, but everything else is on.
Yep.
And so you're like, no, you're sitting around. And so,
Or
I
their
don't know.
servers
It's like,
go out.
Yeah, that's more.
yeah, exactly. And it's like, so I get it, because it does seem the direction we're going. And maybe they've got like, you know, number one, they know more than we do.
Sure.
And number two, they could be just casting vision. They could be just saying, hey, in 2022 and 2023, because a lot of these emails and stuff that are coming out are not new. Like some of them are from like 2020. And, you know, when Phil Spencer is talking about, man, you know, if we got to merge with Nintendo, that would be blah, 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 blah. And people are like, Microsoft's trying to buy Nintendo. And you're like, no, he didn't say buy, number one. He didn't say acquire. He said merge. He said it would be awesome. He didn't say that they were doing it. And that was 3 years ago in an email. And so I think that some of these things aren't new thoughts, but they're just casting vision. Hey, this is what we would like to do and have it come out in 2028. Not that we'll be at a place as a country, technology wise, where we could actually pull off the vision that they're talking about today. So I think a little bit of it's just because they said they want to doesn't mean that they will.
Right.
As we saw with the flubbed Xbox One launch, how many things did they want to do then that they weren't able to continue doing? You know, off the top of my head, I'm thinking of this console doesn't work without the Kinect being connected to it.
Yes.
You know, like all those things where they're like, we want to push Kinect and this, that, and the other. And back then they were talking about being fully online, and they had to back down off that. And so just because they said they want to doesn't mean that they're gonna.
I mean, if you think that companies like this that create and innovate aren't always asking their people to come up with new ideas and make mock-ups and plan years in advance, like when a thing comes out, they didn't just come up with it like 6 months ago. You know, it's so
right.
We shouldn't be
years and
shocked
years of
that-
R&D.
Yeah, there are all sorts of ideas and wishes and what ifs, you know, floating around. I mean, every company does this that wants to grow, you know.
Yeah. You get left behind if you don't. And so, you know, I feel like I've seen just a lot of people, just like Chris is saying, overreacting, number one, but number two, thinking that this is in stone.
Right.
And it's like, it's not, nothing 5 years from now is in stone. You know what I mean?
What's so funny about this
else,
is we talked about, I mean, go back to a couple our episodes maybe a year ago. We've always talked about, especially when the new consoles came out, connectivity. There's still people that don't have decent internet. There's still people that, you know, that have spotty internet, and it's just one of those things. Like, if you're always online, how is that really going to affect your gameplay in an area where maybe you don't have the best, Wi-Fi, and best broadband? And I feel like that's not going to go away yet. I do love the fact that they are future thinking, and I think that's great. Would I like a disc console? Sure, but I'm old school, so I mean I think they're thinking of this is the future. I think this is where things are going to go, and so we're just going to position ourselves to be one of the front runners for that, which they already are in a lot of instances anyway. But for me, I'm the same way as you, Gabe. It's all about, I don't want lag. I do get spotty Wi-Fi sometimes. So if I'm like deep in a game and I have to always connect, like I don't want to have to worry about that.
That's actually a really good point, Tim, because you're in a very affluent town,
yep,
in an affluent county,
yep,
and an affluent neighborhood,
right? And
even your internet, we've, over the years, we've talked about Tim's got probably the worst internet of the four of us.
It's so weird.
And, except for me in Tyler, Texas today. And so, to Tim's point, like I live where the internet should be the best.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And here my internet struggles,
yep,
at times. That's a good point, Tim.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
The last little thing that I'll just touch on real quick with this, there were a few Bethesda games that had got mentioned that they were going to be coming out. Again, this is one of the things I feel like we caught wind of in prior stuff that came out, but they just detail a little bit.
Well, they're all sequels.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
But several of them, the one thing that I think was more concrete that we didn't know prior was that they're thinking that Elder Scrolls 6 won't launch until at least 2026, whereas most people is just like, we know it's coming, but we have it was more nebulous as to when. This at least put a kind of concrete flag in the sand of like, this is when we're expecting it to be ready kind of thing. And then the other thing that I was going to mention, which Gabe already kind of touched on, was the possible acquisition of Nintendo. And I do think that it's fair to say that he was talking about acquiring. In his email, he does use the term merger, but the context of the email leads more towards that term merger really meaning Nintendo buying them. Kind of like you could say, oh, we merged with Bethesda, but really they bought them. They just merged them into their portfolio kind of thing. I think that's more the context. Mm-hmm. But everybody was, as you mentioned, was freaking out about the idea of Microsoft possibly buying Nintendo. And this, again, is something that I feel like we knew this. Like there were a few things in this email that used to be redacted that now are not, but they don't give us a ton of context more further or the high level. We still saw all this stuff and read all this stuff early in this trial. The one thing that I will say is, especially now that it seems all but inevitable that the Activision acquisition is going to go through, I don't think there is any world at all in the future where Microsoft would be allowed to buy Nintendo, even if Nintendo opened the idea.
Way.
Yeah. I just don't think that anybody in their right mind, a governing body around the world, I mean, I'm sure a few of them be like, yeah, sure, do what you want, because some countries be crazy. But I think any of the ones in the Western world, I just don't think that they would allow that. Like you could, there's no way Microsoft could acquire them and not be seen as a monopoly at that point with everything they currently have. There's just no way. So I feel like this would not happen at this point in time. But who knows?
I can't envision a world where Nintendo would be like, hey, we're for sale. Like, right. Or they would even let themselves be bought.
That's what it seems like. It seems like they've got too much pride in what they do and what they've created. And I think it would ruin what Nintendo is if they were bought by Microsoft. And I would hate that, but I'm with Chris. Like, if they can't buy Blizzard.
That's right.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? They can't buy Nintendo. Yeah.
Exactly.
And when I say can't, I just mean all the trouble that they're having to go through.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like, if this is trouble.
It would be years down the road.
Well, they're the big three, right?
Yeah.
There's Sony, there's Microsoft, and there's Nintendo. You can't buy... Microsoft can't then buy. I don't think, like, that sounds crazy to me.
It's like
and
NBC
then it's just Microsoft and Nintendo.
That's right.
Like, we'll take that.
Making
The
NABC.
No, you won't.
The only move in the future, if the gaming landscape becomes so treacherous that they feel they have to, the only one that I feel like could make sense and possibly happen, which still would be a ginormous long shot, would be Nintendo and Sony. And I don't even think it would be a purchase of one of the other, which then again, maybe Nintendo has enough to buy Sony, the gaming division anyways. They possibly do. I would see it more of a traditional merger, only to combat, whatever the landscape is. And the only reason I say that one seems like it could potentially happen if it gets crazy out here is because they're both Japanese companies, and both of them are very, even though they're not owned by the state, they're very tied to that national pride aspect. I mean, you had Mario stuff at the Olympics when they host the Olympics. I just don't see Japan, like people in Japan wanting to be like our most prized, thing that came from our country being owned by someone else.
Yeah, that's right.
Even though Nintendo and Sony very clearly, I mean, Sony PlayStation exists because of the bad blood between those two companies. So I know it seems like a crazy thing. That's how bad I think the situation for competition in gaming would have to get for them to even possibly want to do that. But I just don't see it ever going the Microsoft way, especially now that they're about to own Activision Blizzard.
That's right.
So.
Yeah, it would be a big announcement though, boy, because we've seen. Well, I don't know but we've all seen pictures. I got to see it in real life. I just got lucky enough. I didn't know it was going to be there, but what was it called at the time? The Nintendo PlayStation.
Mm-hmm.
And so they've been in cahoots before, and that is Chris is absolutely right. The place that the Sony PlayStation was birthed out of the troubling Nintendo, Sega, Sony thing that was going on at the time, and so it would be a ginormous announcement like we're back, we're doing it, we tried this once before, but yeah, I don't see any of that. I mean, everybody's making a lot of money.
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
And so I don't know what kind of money you got to be not making for anybody to think. And two, it was under the guise, wasn't a little bit, Chris, under the guise of like, man, this would be, what do you call it? Like a career move. Like it would be a ginormous thing to happen.
Oh, you're talking about Phil Spencer's comments.
Yeah.
Yes.
Phil Spencer's comments when talking about acquiring Nintendo.
Yeah. So he said
like,
it would be, yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, to your point, he was saying he used the term like it would be like a career moment to be able to get Nintendo. And in the context of the email, he does talk about how that he's been in contact with their leadership team. Obviously, there's some relationship has been for a little while now between Microsoft and Nintendo because like Cuphead's on both of them before it ever came to PlayStation and various things. But he talks about how they're not necessarily open to that right now and they have a ton of money and everything, but he discusses the route of like possibly going the route of just buying up shares of the company. And then at some point you could do a hostile takeover, but that doesn't seem like the right move. Instead, let's play the long game. All those are the comments that are in this fully redacted email that come out, which lead toward the idea of like, I think that he does truly mean he wants Nintendo to be owned by Microsoft and be part of just folded into their staple of studios and all their things that they have. But to Gabe's point earlier, he never says the word acquire. He doesn't use that term. So
it's wild. Phil did comment on all these leaks coming out. And it's what you'd think somebody would say.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound, so he goes,
The
we've
master of
seen the
non-speak.
conversation. Yes, that's right. We've seen the conversation around old emails and documents. It is hard to see our team's work shared in this way because so much has changed and there's so much to be excited about right now and in the future. We will share the real plans when we are ready. And now I'm putting emphasis on some things, but I think for him to be like, "Oh, so much has changed since we did that," is like, that's what anybody would say. Like, it's different now.
It's so funny to be like, so much has changed. We'll share the real plans. It's like, how about you just say, nah, that ain't in the works anymore. That would quell all of the craziness. But no, he ain't going to do that. He's going to leave all the doors open because, who knows what the future has kind of thing.
Well, and it's because of where it came from, like you're saying, Chris. Like, this isn't just somewhat whistleblower or somebody that's mad at the company and like sent out a bunch of stuff. And you'd be like, oh, that guy, listen, he was too far down the totem pole.
Yeah.
These were FTC documents that they,
that's right.
that they turned
it's a little
over.
official.
And so, it makes it a little bit, but he's like, I just wonder if I was the FTC, I'd be like, what you mean so much has changed?
I know, right?
Right.
Well, what's your plans? What's your actual plans then? He's like, no, these are the actual plans. I just have to tell them that
That's right.
things have changed, because we got a little egg on our face right now.
Right. We're going to start making chimneys.
Microsoft chimneys.
Yeah.
It's got a lot of leaks.
Oh,
hey.
Yeah. Nice. I like it.